Okay, I am beginning to let people in. They are coming in now. And once you're ready to get started, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I will start the record button.
All right, let's get started at 6:05. But we can pull the agenda up on the screen. But wait a minute. Before we get started, Gottlieb and Joy would be in the general audience, and then we would have to promote them.
No, just Gabby. I'll be checking to see if they're there. I don't see either one of them.
Joy just logged on. She's here.
Okay, good. I was going to say she has a panelist. Okay, I'm getting ready to promote. Well, when you're ready for Mr. Simon, I will promote him at that time.
Okay. Well, since Ms. Phillips is here.
I'm sorry, it's asking me for a password and all that stuff, and normally I just get in, so I couldn't understand what was going on. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries. Welcome and good evening.
Thanks.
Good evening.
I guess we can go Facebook Live now, Jules. We're ready to go. Mr. Chairman, it's on you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to meeting number 2 of the DC Ward 8 Redistricting Committee. Map redrawing and ANC realignment effort. As you all may have learned from the last meeting, I am your chair, Commissioner Brian Thompson of ANC 8A. And as well, if we could get just a quick roll call introduction for the committee members who are on, please state your name and let everyone know you're here.
Barbara Jones, present.
Commissioner Muhammad, I think we lost you a bit.
Holly, present.
All right.
Nick Job, present.
Maggie Edwards, present.
Being Bill, present. Sorry.
Sheila Bunn, present.
Jimmy Lloyd, present.
Juan Mason, present.
And former Commissioner Presswood, are you present? I saw you sort of logging in. Are you there? All right, no worries. Well, let's go ahead and get started. As you all can see from the agenda on screen, we have 2 guest speakers this evening. Ms. Joy Phillips of the DC Office of Planning, or OP, as well as Gottlieb Simon, the retired executive director of the Office of the ANC. And the hope with inviting our 2 guest speakers is that they can both provide historical as well as present context for our effort, things we should keep in mind in our efforts to redraw the boundaries. And there's a lot of nuance in how our boundaries are going to be shaped just based on being in our individual ward. Particularly, we are as Ward 8, we are now on both sides of the Anacostia River, and everyone is well aware of that. But relative to the former Ward 8 boundaries, ANC 8A as well as ANC 8E had the largest increase in population from the 2010 census to 2020. And they were an increase of 12 and 10% respectively. And I mention that because the weight of the increase in the ward that is not west of the river, it happened at the top and bottom, northern and southernmost ends of the ward. So when we look to redraw the commissions and in terms of finding balance, there is something to be said for, do we look to reduce or expand those 2 largest commissions by population, in this effort. The other thing, and maybe I stated this before, it just wasn't clear about it, but I had enough questions that I wanted to point out here that we had an increase in population of about 10 or 11,000 people in the ward from the 2010 census. And given that each commission, we had 5 commissions, 8A through 8E, prior, with approximately 2,000 people per SMD. With that addition of essentially 10,000 people there, that created a need to have 5 new SMDs, which is essentially a new commission. So that's how we started that conversation of having an 8F, and saying that right now we're going to have at least 6 commissions. In addition, the idea was raised that because of the way the portion of Ward 6 south of the 695 Southeast Southwest Freeway, east of South Capitol Street, and west of New Jersey Avenue, north of I Street, the way that's cut out to remain in Ward 6, but just the natural boundaries of the area align with Navy Yard and the larger addition to Ward 8. It was raised that if it was agreed to by the council member as well as Councilmember Allen, that cluster be included in a new ANC to include those portions of Ward 8 west of the river. The reason being is because there's a lot of zoning, building, planning issues that exist in Ward 6 that are now coming into Ward 8, and for historical context and a solid local perspective, that cluster that is still remaining in Ward 6 for an overall voting block has more of a lived alignment with the rest of our new Ward 8 residents, constituents. So that idea was just raised as an idea to have a by-ward ANC that included that cluster that I mentioned geographically in the northwest corner of the Navy Yard area that remains in Ward 6. Now, this wouldn't affect the population of Ward 8 per the census or per our effort, but it would enable the folks who have the same hyper-local issues in that corner of Ward 8 in Navy Yard to have that conversation, basically living, within a block or two of the rest of their neighbors. So just wanted to make that statement here. But more so, let me not do all the talking. I see that Gottlieb has joined us. And Ms. Phillips, if you don't mind, I'd like to have Gottlieb introduce himself and say some words, some thoughts on this effort we're attempting to do in redrawing the Ward 8 ANC boundaries, creating SMDs, and just how this effort has gone over the last census or two. What should we keep in mind here? Gottlieb, if you're ready, please introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, indeed. Thank you very much, Commissioner Thompson, Mr. Chairman, for tonight. I would indeed, however, be happy to defer to Dr. Phillips to go first. I think I might be able to build a little bit on what she presents better than the other way around. And by the way, when I disappear from the screen in a moment, the area that you were just talking about is visible in my background.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Gottlieb. Ms. Phillips, would you mind going first? I think you're muted.
Okay, I guess everyone can see the slides clearly. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
so thanks for inviting me. And I am Joy Phillips, the Associate Director of the Data Analysis and Visualization Unit at the DC Office of Planning. I'm happy to be here to discuss with you the role of the Office of Planning in the 2022 ANC and SMD redistricting process. Next slide, please. Okay, OP's general role. The Office of Planning's general role in the redistricting process continues to be to assist the Executive Office of the Mayor by providing technical and analytical support to the Council's Subcommittee on Redistricting. Now that we are in what I term the second phase of the redistricting process, the role of the office continues to be to provide technical and analytical support, but this time to the task force, to the 8 ward task forces. So we will extend there. Next slide, please. Now let's look at some of the Office of Planning specific roles. And this slide is showing you data analysis and tools. The Office of Planning will continue to analyze the 2020 Census redistricting data and prepare population and housing characteristic files by ANC and SMD, by census tract and census block geography. We have already prepared some of those data files for you, and I've shared it with the council representative and with the, am I hearing?
We can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry. Yes, with the council representative and with the task force chair. And in turn, I'm thinking that they will share it with the task force members. The other point here is that the Office of Planning will continue to make the ESRI redistricting tool available for ANC and SMD redistricting. So this is the ESRI tool that was used for the ward redistricting. We have extended the use of that tool for the ANC and SMD redistricting as well. The Office of Planning will also ensure that the templates that show each of the wards by census blocks are available on the redistricting tool to facilitate the easy drawing of new ANC and SMD boundaries. Next slide, please. Right, tool access and training. The Office of Planning will continue to provide access to the ESRI redistricting tool for use in creating the final maps. The tool can be accessed here, and I've indicated the URL. The procedures for accessing the tool are the same as was used in the ward redistricting. You first got to create an account and log in, and then the tool will be available to you. We had so far 2 sets of training for folks can understand how to use the ESRI redistricting tool. This training was provided to council representatives, to task force leadership, and other selected task force members. As I said again, the tool is available online for everyone. We have also posted online a reference guide for those who could not go to the training, as well as I think yesterday I've posted the video tutorial from the training that was done on Monday night. So even if you have or have not gone to the training, you can look at the video tutorial and follow along and see how to use the tool to redraw those boundaries. Next slide, please. Okay, maps and data availability. The Office of Planning will continue to create electronic and hard copy maps and data tables for task force use. And I'm giving you the URL where you can access those maps and tables, and anyone on the task force can go onto our website and download the maps and tables that will be useful in redrawing the ANCs and SMDs for Ward 8. The Office of Planning has also provided 4 copies of ward-sized maps of the entire ward to each task force. There were 2 copies that shows the ANC and SMD boundaries, and 2 copies that did not show the ANC and SMD boundaries. And the intent is that those who want to start from scratch can do so without looking at the ANC and SMD boundaries, and those who want to make modifications to the existing boundaries can do so. So these maps will show the census block identifier and the number of persons in each of the census block, together with population estimates for the existing ANC and SMD. Next slide, please. Okay, census block splitting. Now this slide is very important. Now, while it is for each task force to decide whether it is necessary to split a census block, this typically is unnecessary and should be avoided if possible. Splitting census blocks increases the amount of time necessary to process each proposal. However, if a task force wishes to split a census block, it will need to work with the Office of Planning to obtain an estimate of the number of persons living in each portion of that census block and allow additional lead time at each stage of the redistricting process. Now, how we split census block is that the Census Bureau's data is not adequate to split for us to know how much population is allocated on each side of the split. So what we do is that we use the district's master address repository and look at the housing units along that census block and make a determination as to what the proportions are. And then we decide to allocate the population based on those proportions. So it's not an exact science, but that's the best we can do. That's if the task force chooses to split a census block. So again, we encourage you not to do so unless it is absolutely necessary. Next slide, please. Working relations. The chair or assigned point of contact of each task force must work with the Office of Planning to validate that the word description and the boundaries as intended are consistent before submitting. So if you are using the tool rather than word description, you will see meets and bounds. So for those who are not familiar, that's what the word description means. So after you draw each one of those boundaries, the word description is important. It goes into the legislation. So we must be accurate in terms of the word description that defines each of those boundaries. So again, the Office of Planning will assist you in reviewing those word descriptions before you submit to council. We will assist you in clarifying the proposed boundary text as much as time and resources allow. So again, the earlier you finish redrawing your boundaries and the earlier you submit to the Office of Planning for review, the better able we are to ensure that your description is correct. Next slide, please. Boundary clarification and availability. The Office of Planning has no role whatsoever in recommending where boundaries should be, but we will advise the council on whether the language recommended by the task force describe the boundaries clearly and accurately. The Office of Planning will also confirm the number of persons in each area. We will also respond to task force questions as promptly as possible, again, given available resources. Due to the volume of meetings of task force groups and subgroups, the Office of Planning will not be able to attend all task force meetings. So we are planning to attend 1 or 2 of these meetings throughout the redistricting process. Next slide, please. Right, now I get to the slides where I'll describe the tables that have been provided on the website. And I've also sent copies of these tables to the council reps and to the task force chairs. So there are 6 tables. 3 of them will deal with the ANC data and 3 of them deals with the SMD data. So table 1, as you can see on the screen, is just a segment of the table. The table covers all the advisory neighborhood commissions. Yeah, all 40 of them, but this is just a snapshot so you can see what the table looks like. On the first column are the ANC identifiers. Column 2 shows the total population, and column 3 onwards shows the population by race. Then there will be housing unit numbers, group quarter information. So again, this data is from the 2020 census, but it's using the 2013 ANC boundaries. Next slide, please. Table 2, again, this is a segment of the full table, but table 2 is providing you with more details. Again, it will be the census 2020 population, housing units, and group quarter information. First column again will be the ANC identifier. Column 2, the census tracts. Column 3, the census blocks. And column 4, this is important, it will show if there is a split block in the existing ANC boundaries, there will be an asterisk in that row that corresponds to the census block. If there were no splits, then that row will be blank for this column. Next slide, please. Okay, table 3 shows again the ANC's identifier in column 1, then shows the 2010 population count, the 2020 population count, then the numeric and percentage change from 2010 to 2020. Next.
Joy, you went on mute. We're not able to hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. So table 4, again, it is similar to the ANC tables. Again, you see the SMDs identifier on that first column, and it follows in the same order with the population by race, population by housing unit, population by group quarters. Next slide, please. Okay, table 5, again, similar to table 2 for ANCs, it shows the identifier for the SMD. And this one I've highlighted what a census block split looks like. In column 4, there's an asterisk indicating that block 1001 of census tract 3902 is a split block. And that block is split with, again, the same census block 1001 in census tract 3902. But part of that split is in SMD 1CO4, and the second part of that split is in 1CO5. So it is important that when you are using the hard copy maps to look at the areas that you will withdraw, look and see if there were any splits. And it's good to use the tables as well to make sure that you don't miss the split, because we cannot show the split blocks on the maps. That piece is important. We could not show the split blocks on the map. We just had to overlay the census block and shows the full population of that census block. So bear that in mind. Next slide, please. Right, so similarly, again, you will see the SMD identifier and the 2010 population count, the 2020 population count, and the change from 2010 to 2020 in this, this table. Again, this is just a segment. All the SMDs are presented on this table. Next. Okay, now, as I said, we supply 2 maps to the council and to the task forces. One of the maps has the ANC and SMD boundaries, the existing boundaries. So you will see in blue, that's the boundaries for the SMD, and in that sort of goldish brown color, that will be the boundary for the ANC, and then the ward boundary will be in gray. Within each of those SMDs, you will see the census block. On row 1 will be the census block identifier, and row 2 will be the population count. So this map is for those who want to use the existing boundaries and do some modification to create the new set of boundaries. Next slide, please. Right, this one is the ward map without the ANC or SMD. And here the idea is for folks who want to start from scratch, just abandon the existing boundaries and withdraw new boundaries. So we do not show the ANC and SMD boundaries on this map. Again, you can see the census block identifier and the population count for each of those blocks. Okay, next slide. I think that's my presentation. This is my contact information. So I'm now open to questions.
Ms. Phillips, thank you. Thank you. I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to let the rest of the committee members and anyone else who has a question, please raise your hand so you can be recognized, or put your comment in the chat. Either way, If there's not a clamor for attention, just feel free to speak up on your questions. Not all at once.
Joy, I have a quick question for you. This is Wanda.
Oh, sure.
We had a request for a map that shows neighborhoods. Does the Office of Planning have such a map that actually lists the neighborhoods?
Okay, so the Office of Planning has used neighborhood maps before. However, we are always hesitant to provide those because there is no legal set of boundaries for neighborhoods. So if you ask 5 people, each one is going to tell you, or rather going to give you a different set of boundaries for their neighborhood. So we try not to do that. Those neighborhood boundaries will, that the Office of Planning used, neighborhood clusters, they were created back in early 2000 for a specific project. We continue to use them for one reason or another. However, they are not official boundaries.
Understood. Is it available for us to just have as just a reference, but not necessarily for this exercise?
Yes, I can provide that for you with that disclaimer.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, no, that's perfect. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I see Miss Joy Doyle has her hand up in the attendee list. Is there a way to let her speak, or
Yes, let me go there and pull her hand up. Let me see who that is. Okay, I see Joy here. Joy, you are now able to speak.
Hi, how you guys doing? Hey, Dr. Phillips. I have a quick question for you. You know, I have a love-hate relationship with data, particularly because it does not show the diversity within the constructs of race. So it's when you're talking about units, housing units, will your data separate homeowners from renters? And when you're looking at this data, how will we know the difference, even down to like education, that makes up those within various ANCs? So how deep of a dive could we go to get this information?
Right, so the data does not separate homeowners from renters. That data in terms of homeowners and renters, that comes out of a different data source. So it basically will give you, in terms of the 2020 Census redistricting data that you are to use for this redistricting process, it gives you the population total, it gives you the population by race. In terms of housing unit, it gives you occupied, and vacant. That's the limit to what you will get from the information. In terms of education and those other socioeconomic variables, those were not on the census questionnaire. They are collected from the American Community Survey, so they will not be part of the redistricting process.
You on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, does that answer your question, Joy? All right. I see Miss Bunn has her hand up again. Sheila?
Good evening, and apologies for not being on camera, but my daughter's at swim practice and I'm sitting in my car doing this. So, Joy, good to see you again. Question, can you talk about how the public is able to submit their maps, just so they are aware of what that process is, so that we can see, you know, what their ideas might be for what the boundaries look like?
Right, that determination, or rather that decision is made by the task force, not the Office of Planning.
No, I know that. I'm just talking about using the system in terms of using Esri.
Right, so if you use Esri, then you will create a map and save it on the tool and share it with your other folks in that shared group, or submit it to your task force chair for review. That's how the process works.
Okay, and I guess my question was, because when I was using the system, can you direct so people will be able to directly share with us, or are they sharing in the system and we have to go into the system and find their map?
Right. In terms of what was done on the training, the gentleman showed how to create that shared group, and if you want to create a group, you invite people to be in that group, and then you share that map with them, and that's how that cluster will work if you do that.
Okay, okay.
So the person must have an account. They must register and have an account on the tool in order for you to share a map with them. Otherwise you can export a map and send it to that person. So you get it now outside of the tool. So you can save your map and you can export it out of the tool and send it to someone else.
Okay, thank you for that, because that wasn't shared in the training I attended, and I haven't seen the second training. So people can export it outside of the system and then share it. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I just had a couple of questions, Ms. Phillips. The first one is the wall maps. We did receive the wall maps, but doesn't that imply that the intent is to meet in person around those maps? And given the ongoing health emergency, operational status of DC government, like what's the intent there? What should we do with it?
The intent is for the council representatives and the task force chairs to make a decision when they receive those maps, either to make additional copies, to distribute them to the task force membership or selected task force members, to share them electronically with the task force members, to make a decision whether or not they want to meet in person, whether they want to meet virtually. All that is the decision of the task force to make.
Got it. It's an open-ended resource, not necessarily a tasking from OP on
Exactly.
using. Okay, the split census blocks. How often does this happen, like across the city, or doing a redistricting effort that you split census blocks? And given that they can't be shown on maps, like what's the compelling argument for doing this?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer what's the compelling argument, but some folks have chosen to split their census blocks because they feel that this is the area where they want to draw those boundaries, and we try to discourage them, but the DC code says the same thing, is that use the census blocks. However, if there are compelling reasons to do otherwise, then it's accepted. That's all I can tell you at this point.
Okay. All right.
So for instance, for the last redistricting process, there were 33 census block splits.
Out
so
of,
in the
I
existing
imagine,
boundaries, there are
thousands
33.
of census blocks.
Right, and it's a burden. That's all I can tell you. 33 of them were split. It's a really big challenge. I would not point any fingers right now, but I think I think you all did fine.
All right, thank you.
No, by not splitting. That's what I'm trying to say.
The ward. Thank you for that. Thank you. The word description that you mentioned has to accompany the maps that we submit to the subcommittee. Does the word description include the is it at the SMD level or the commission level, the ANC level?
So the description that goes in, I mean, the report that comes from the subcommittee on redistricting will detail exactly what the report should contain. However, if you look at past legislation on AMC and ANCs and SMDs, you have to have a description of both the ANC and each of those SMDs within the AMC. So it's a description of both sets of geography.
So we're looking at 6 or so ANCs, and then we're looking at 40, 45 SMDs that need to be like bounded on the west by Southern Avenue, on the north by Alabama Avenue, etc.
Yeah,
And
that's how it has been all the decades. Every 10 years, you've got to describe those. You got to describe each one of those SMDs within those ANCs. Gottlieb will tell you some better when he comes on. Yeah.
So then it's fair to say then we should only have to do that once with the map that we end up submitting, voting on and submitting at the end of our efforts, right? Like,
yes, after you've reviewed, you just got to do it once. But
okay.
you got to describe each one of, if you have 40 AMCs at the end of the day, you have to describe each one of those 40.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So you can take a look at the district code and see what the existing ANC and SMD descriptions look like. That will be a good place to start.
Yeah, I've studied them before. I get it. It's a lot of work or a lot of writing, but if you only got to do it once, then sure.
Right, and if you have somebody that is using the Esri tool, it helps you probably 80 or 90% of the way. That's where you do the report and you select meets and bounds. It will do that description for you, but it is not a 100%. It will not complete it 100%. There are some missing lines here and there, so you will have to fill in the blanks for those areas. But using the tool is going to help you tremendously.
Yes, ma'am. And last question, for the ANC data files, how should we use those files? In my mind, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of data. I mean, it's a database. It's a spreadsheet that allows you to be able to go by our key measure here, which is population, to then break down or create SMDs out of that. The problem is that if you try to do it that way, your map could look terrible and your numbers could be awesome. If you try to do it map-wise, which I've tried both ways already, like in the last 2 weeks, if you try to draw the boundaries map-wise, they don't necessarily match up across the entire ward when it comes to creating boundaries for the ANCs and the SMDs. So how should we use those data files? Are they alternative methods for our efforts to create the boundaries? Any advice on that?
Right, so it seems as though that you have been trying, and the folks that are using the hard copy maps, that's what they will do, something like that. So that's why we have an additional option for you to do by using the tool. So it's a combination of the tool, it's a combination of hard copy. What we try to do is to make anyone participate, in terms of like the folks that are not probably that tech savvy in sort of using the GIS tool. We wanted to make them have a say in what happens. So for them, the hard copy might be the one of preference, and then they will submit whatever their ideas are to you. But we have provided all there with the hard copy and the electronic format, and it's for you to decide how you want to, what approach you want to take. The Office of Planning does not tell you what approach. We try to provide for you all the tools that you will need to make that decision on what approach you will take. Again, Gottlieb has some experience, probably 2 or 3 rounds of redistricting, so he might be able to give you some pointers as to the best way to go about using either the hard copy maps, the electronic maps, or the tool.
Fair enough. Thank you, Ms. Phillips. And if I can restate that, the Excel data files that we have are an accompanied alternative to using the tool to create your maps. So you can do this in hard copy on your kitchen table to come up with an idea for a map, but it's extremely helpful to print out those Excel files so that you understand what populations you're working with if you're going to do this in hard copy form. Whereas the Esri tool sort of combines all of that information and does sort of the drawing for you, at least by census tract, in a way that might be a bit easier. Just saying to say that there's more than one way to do this, but gosh, it's a lot of information if you're going to print all that Excel data out.
No, they are electronic files, so it's just to assist you in terms of seeing where the you cannot use the the maps sort of, the hard copy maps sort of like without the Excel files. You cannot use the Excel files by itself. It's just, we are just giving you tools to assist you in trying to make your life easier when you do this withdrawing, but none of them is perfect. It's a combination will work for you.
Okay, okay. All right. That's all I had. And Gottlieb has been waiting patiently. Any other questions, thoughts?
I had one question before we move on, if that's okay. And Joy, thank you for trying to make our life so much easier with these tools. My question to you, in your presentation, you mentioned that it would be good to get you the maps sooner rather than later in terms of for description and just for guidance. Can you give us some kind of time frame when you think a good time for us? I know the council, I think, want to vote on April 1st, even though there was some conversation at our meeting yesterday that some dates may be moved around because of the ANC, but that's another story. But what is an ideal time frame for the Office of Planning to get a draft map?
Right. So from what I'm seeing is that most of the meetings have begun for the various task forces. So I know that most folks will be probably fully trying to redraw those lines in February. So I'm thinking like at the beginning of March, folks should be ready, you know, start, you know, like you're winding down and you're trying to get those final lines, you know, ready. However, we cannot, the Office of Planning cannot tell you, oh, you've got to give it to us by the first week of March or the second or the third. You know that your deadline at this point, unless they change it, is April 1st. So you have to try as best you can to see how soon you can get those done to meet that deadline, so that you at least to give us a chance to review without rushing with the 8 task forces and then giving you that approval to move on to submitting it to council. But if you don't have the time to submit to us first, there is nothing we can do, because your ultimate aim is to submit to council. We are just trying to have that. If you give us in advance, we'll take a look and try to make sure that you did the correct thing before you submit to council. So the Office of Planning does not have a deadline for you to submit to us.
Okay, okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Excellent. All right.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Please.
Right, and remember to ask Gottlieb all those hard questions, okay? All right, bye.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right, Gottlieb, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Patient, and we look forward to hearing your guidance and wisdom in this effort.
Thank you. I'll try to share what I can. Let me know at any time if my sound is a problem. Otherwise, I'll assume it's okay. I think possibly, so far so good. Okay. I think possibly I'll be able to be a little bit more helpful and on a Q&A basis as we go forward, but I'll offer a few opening thoughts as well. I have been involved with the redistricting in one form or another since, I guess, 1979 or so, when we were getting ready for the 80s. Was involved in my own ANC, and the last time I was sitting on a task force was in the 91 version. And in the 2001 version, I had the extreme pleasure of serving kind of as OP. And I was prepared to make lots of suggestions and recommendations about how to package the report that you were going to send in. Because in 2001, I received those reports and had to turn them into the maps that we were using in that go-around. Well, guess what? This SRE tool that's been talked about is fabulous. It takes out a whole lot of the work that had to be done at the end, translating the boundaries into language. As Joy indicated, there are parts that it can't do because there are boundaries that the census tract uses or boundaries that we want to use that aren't streets. They may be property lines. They may be a stream or things that don't have a ready geographical definition. So those things have to be filled in on a case-by-case basis, but otherwise the tool is tremendously helpful for that. The tool is also really helpful in doing a lot of the math for us. For instance, after we put in the population for Ward 8, all we have to do is effectively say how big the districts have to be, and it starts telling us that the same way we could have used a hand calculator, that's to be sure, that we need between 40 and 44 SMDs in order to meet the requirements. And at the risk of just boring people with redundancy, I'll just remind everyone that the job that the DC law sets is to say that all of the single member districts have to be more or less equal, focusing on 2,000. And we're allowed to be either 100 more than 2,000 or 100 less than 2,000. So 2,100 down to 1,900 is the job. And so that means with regard to Ward 8, there could be as many as 44 single member districts or as few as 40. We have right now a very symmetrical arrangement. We have 5 advisory neighborhood commissions, each of which is made up of 7 members. It's probably not going to be possible for you to have symmetry like that this time going around. You could conceivably have 7 advisory neighborhood commissions, each made up of 6 members, or 42 would get you the other way around. You could have 6 ANCs made up of 7 members each. And that gets it. So you'd have 1 more ANC than you have right now, by one way of doing this. Mr. Chairman, you look like you're trying to formulate a question for me.
Yeah, we have to, I mean, I can't see how we could have any less than 6. Like we're at 5 now and we gain 10,000
Right.
people. So
Exactly.
And to add to the number analysis, it seems like we have to pick a multiple of 7 and likely we'll go. So we picked a multiple of 7 at 35. That would leave somewhere in the range of 5, 8 SMDs. We have to pick a multiple of 7 less than 35, which would be 28, which would mean 4 commissions of 7, a commission of 5, a commission of 9. What is that? 9 and 14 to 28 is 42. And just with the goal, or I think in our last conversation, we agreed that we needed to end up with either 5, 7, or 9 SMDs per commission. We would have to pick a multiple of 7 and then end up with 1 commission with 5 and 1 with 9 in order to make the numbers match up in that 42 to 44 range.
Generally speaking, I agree with that, except for one thing. I'm really pretty strong on the issue of oddness. Now, I don't mean that in terms of people. I'm talking about the number of seats on an SMD, of course. And so I'm going to tell a story that anybody who's gone to other of these meetings is going to recognize I've told before. I find that having an odd number of SMDs is neither a necessary or sufficient condition to achieving, avoiding deadlocks on ANCs, specifically with regard to your election. So here's my story. I'm in office in the Office of ANCs, I guess maybe it's first couple of years, and I'm called to Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1B, as I've done with other ANCs, to run their election. At that time, ANC 1B was made up of 11 commissioners. So you'd say to yourself, it's an odd number, there's not going to be a problem here. Guess what? We had 2 candidates running for chair, the incumbent and a new person. And as we went down the list, it was a roll call. First one got a vote, then the other one got a vote, then the first one got a vote, the other one got a vote. We got down to 10 votes having been cast. And I turned to the 11th commissioner and asked, who is your vote for? And she said, neither. I can't vote for either of these candidates. I will not vote for either of these candidates. And she did not vote for either of those candidates. This led to a stalemate that persisted for months, but it was eventually resolved. 2 years later, different candidates, even some different commissioners, ANC 1B, still 11 odd numbered commission, stalemate for chairperson. Had a similar experience in another 7-member ANC, where again, someone wouldn't vote, or I believe in that particular case, there was an absence. So remember, just because there are an odd number of seats doesn't guarantee that all of those seats will be filled in January. We frequently have a situation where a seat is vacant at the beginning of the term, and we have to have a special election. Somebody could be on travel, somebody could be sick, somebody could be absent for a whole number of reasons, and you wind up with an even number of people at the election meeting. Consequently, some years ago, I advised the council, and they accepted my recommendation to require that ANCs have tie-breaking mechanisms in their bylaws. So if you have a tiebreaker, it doesn't matter whether you have an even number of seats, you will be able to break the tie. And it isn't the number of seats that's going to make that determination. It's going to be the procedures and the rules that you have in place. So my bottom line is, don't worry about whether or not you have an odd number or an even number of seats. Worry about whether or not you have neighborhood cohesiveness. Worry about whether or not the structure of the boundaries of your ANC match the geography and not the mathematics of an even or an odd number. Should I repeat that? Because maybe something wasn't clear.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Can I ask what percentage, or if you know the number, how many ANCs across the city are even numbered?
I don't know the percentage, but I will tell you, because I did pay attention to this in the past. The typical sized ANC is in fact 7. But of course, Ward 7 and Ward 8 are all made up of 7-person ANCs. So that helps push it in that direction. But we have 2 ANCs in Ward 1 that are made up of 12. We have others that are even numbered. So this is not an issue. This is not an overriding description of the ANCs.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee members, does anyone have any thoughts on, would anybody object to having a 4-member or a 12-member ANC in Ward 8?
Hey, Mr.
You
Chairman.
said-
Oh, yeah.
I'll let Jamila go because she's a current ANC, but I was just trying to understand your calculation. You said a 4-member or 12-member?
So yeah, Gottlieb just mentioned that there are places where there are 12-member ANCs, which if the standard deviation or if the standard is 7, then I mean, I guess you could go as low as 2, but I stuck with 4, and then I went as high as 12. You can go above or below the mean by an even number and end up with 2 or 12. Does anybody have any feelings about that as we go about our work here?
I'll be quick. I would imagine, just thinking about the workload that we carry on ANCs, you know, having just an ANC of 4 people, knowing that people have life, people get sick, things happen. That's a lot of work for just those 4 people. And I think having a couple of more bodies on their commission would be better for them, looking at everything we deal with in our community and how much we deal with in the community. And so I definitely wouldn't recommend under 5. Just on the odd number, odd versus even, Gottlieb, you're right. Every commissioner doesn't show up at every meeting. People, have life things that happen, but just for me personally, I think it makes the work a lot easier having an odd number of people versus having an even number of people, and not just for elections, but for other votes and other work that you need to get done. So I think before just kind of quickly making that decision, having more time to talk that through as a task force, more time from current commissioners, former commissioners, talk about their experiences to make sure that we're not further setting our commissions up for issues, because that we're not further setting our commissions up for issues and work is being stopped, and just looking at the reality.
Sure. Definitely, my recommendation to you is not to prematurely close your minds to any particular numerical setup. That's my main point. So it may be that you have a 6-member ANC and a 7-member ANC, rather than trying to force the numbers into having 2 7-member ANCs or 1 7 and 1 5.
So I've been permutation doodling on my notepad here, and I think we could end up with 9, 9, 5, 5, and 7, get 44 SMDs out of that, create 6 ANCs. And that wouldn't upset the 2010 ANC balance in Ward 8 much, given the growth, where the growth in population happened. Does that, does my attempt to stick with that odd number and that 9, 9, 5, 5, and 7 combination trouble you any, Gottlieb?
No, but I do still recommend that you look to see where the map pushes you, so to speak.
Okay.
So over, which shoulder? It must be this shoulder over here. Okay, so this area that my finger is trying to find, because I'm looking at a mirror image of it, this is the new area that you have across the river.
Mm-hmm.
And the population there is enough for 3.5 SMDs.
Yep. I've run into that trouble left and right.
So, you're going to have a challenge as to what to do with, if nothing else, that half, right? So in any case, it doesn't readily lend itself to a advanced decision as to 4, 5, or even or odd. And by the way, just for the record, currently we have a 2-member ANC and we have a 3-member ANC. And I would agree with anybody. Yes. ANC 2C has 3 members and 2D has 2 members. And I would certainly agree with everybody that, with Commissioner White, that those are too few, but they're not complaining.
Somebody drew that map and folks voted on it in 2010. So
well, not only did they draw that map, but the folks in 2D, and 2D, just for a little context, that happens to be the ANC in which the Obamas and the President Trump's daughter live as well. So it's a rather exclusive area. They had features that they felt were best served by having boundaries that they have. So yes, that was done with intentionality. It was done with not only the support, but with the desire of the residents. And the other ANCs in Ward 2 thought that was a reasonable way to handle it.
Okay. While attempting to draw the maps, I noticed that there's a gaping population hole where Berry Farms traditionally has been. that is likely going to be filled in between now and the next census. Any advice about how to use that space in this effort?
Sure. Here's what you want to think about. You're not allowed to develop an SMD with phantom people or with projected people. You can only develop the ANC with who's there in April of 2020, even though in April 15th, the whole building opens up and there are 1,000 people. So we have to deal with the census numbers that exist that we've been given to deal with. That doesn't mean, however, that the boundaries that you can't make. So you will have some census tracts that will be 0, which is what you're talking about with Berry Farms at the present time.
Mm-hmm.
You may also have a recreation center or a park, and it will have 0 as well. And so the adjacent area is going to be the one that includes that rec center, that park, or that undeveloped parcel of land. And so the question that the task force will deal with is, in the meantime, which would be the best adjacent ANC / single member district to put it into?
To put it into, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that area, whatever it is going to be the subject of government action. And whatever agency is dealing with it is going to be sending somebody a notice that something is happening in the blank area, in the vacant area, in the whole area. And so which ANC is the one that would be the best, let's say, guardian for that area until it is repopulated? You'll look at, let's say, a park or a rec center, and is the immediate area on one side of it populated and the other area less so? Well, that'll lead you to think that the populated area would be the one that would be the most interested in development. And so it would make sense to bound that undeveloped area, that unpopulated area, into the adjacent area which you as task force members believe would have the greatest interest in what happens there.
Understood. Mr. Prestwood has a question and his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Golly, great to see you and hear you. And once again, congratulations on your retirement, although you haven't gone very far from the work. Hey, you already answered one of my questions, which is that I remember years ago there was an ANC that only had 2 commissioners, and was very curious about how they got there. So you actually answered that. Here's my second question, though. Over in Ward 7, they used to have an ANC 7A, and I believe some type of issue happened, and then the decision was to I guess dismantle 7A and to create 7F. And so they do have a 7F, but they don't have a 7A. That's not something that we're talking about here. But I was just curious what type of bearing that could potentially have on us over here in in Ward 8, as we create our maps with the potential of adding an F.
Oh, it just gives us an opportunity for an arcane discussion. Basically, what happened in Ward 7 wasn't that they did anything to the existing ANC, except that they simply rebranded it, kind of like what happened with the Washington football team. Someone felt that there was a need to establish a new image, and the redistricting team was responsive to that feeling, and in the absence of anybody who felt a strong connection with alphabets, no one argued against changing A to F. That's all. The boundaries were virtually unchanged. but the letter was exchanged for a new letter with the expectation that this would lead to 7F having a fresh start, so to speak.
Got it. All right.
By the way, there's no 3A either.
Oh, okay. And it starts with 3B?
In the case of 3A, Ward 3, they had a redistricting where 3A wound up in Ward 2. And so they lost that particular area, and that left them with 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, at which point they could have exchanged all of the letters and dropped them by one. And so 3B would have been 3A, and 3C would have been 3B, and 3D would have been 3. Your head, you know, would fall off trying to follow last year and this year. So they said, well, let's just forget A. And they went on from there. End of happy story.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering whether, oh, there's a question. Let me yield.
Yeah, there are more questions. Ms. Joe? So you got your hand up? Yep.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I just really wanted to just give my advice about creating more commissions and the size of them. I don't really see a big problem with the small boards. Actually, I kind of prefer them because what I've seen in the ANCs is that they have more collaboration and ownership of their work. And they take less time when it comes to decision making, and it's easier to schedule and manage. And also too, with the larger commissions, I just think that the meetings don't run as smoothly, and they're less effective because a lot of people want time to talk and we only have 2 hours. So when considering the size of your ANCs, I think like 7 should be fine, but 12, no, that would be too much. That's just my opinion.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, Ms. Joe. Ms. Bunn?
Thank you, Chair. So 2 things. First, to the point about sizing. I just think, and I'm not wedded to any number, but do agree, don't want the SMD members to be too small or too large, because I too have seen where too large has been overwhelming and non-productive, and too small has been too much work for a particular SMD, depending on what's going on in their particular neighborhoods. I think we need to look at the numbers and see how that plays out. And then secondly, my question for Gottlieb, and good to see you, Happy New Year.
Likewise.
So I am two-parting here because I'm on the Ward 8 task force, but I'm also staffing the Ward 7 one through my job. And we've been in search of the prior task force reports. And I think that would be helpful for both task force, but we can't seem to find them. It's like they're lost in ether. Nobody can find the written reports of previous task force. Do you have any idea of where those might be, or are they just gone with the wind?
I'll make a note to see if I can identify some. I know that some of the reports are online, but I didn't take note of whether all of them were online or not. But Sheila, I'll make a note right now to look for Ward 7 TF report of 10 years
and
ago.
8. Yeah, 8 would be helpful as well for our work. We've reached out to the subcommittee on redistricting. It's not on LIMS. So
you know, I'm starting to remember now. There may not have been a report for Ward 7. I believe that for whatever reason, the boundaries were worked up by council staff at that time, or maybe in conjunction with OP. I can't remember, But what I am recalling now is that there was a problem with the Ward 7 boundaries, and they had to be extensively worked on at the staff end of the things. So
What about the Ward?
What's that?
What about the Ward 8 report? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember any problem with that one, but I'll still look for that one as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if we could have the Ward 8 report, that would be great. Just to kind of see what was done there. Thank you.
Yeah, I second that, Gottlieb. If
sure.
Yeah. Mr. Meadows has his hand up.
Yes, hi, everybody. Hello, Gottlieb. Good to see you. Looking good. I think, Sheila, if you look at, it's not in LIMS. When the committee report, it wouldn't be under there. No, I don't know, but check that out again. And the final report, I was working at the council, and as we know, the Ward 7, Ward 6 boundary, it was changed at the last minute. So that's probably why there's not a report there. But there's got to be legislative services has to have a hard copy of it. But beyond that, I prefer a 5 to 9. I wouldn't want to go bigger. I know when like Anita was on 5C, they had 12 people, and that was just herding cats. But Gottlieb, I wanted to ask you if you have any data or any information, because we've been around for a while, and we realized that many SMDs in the wards have had no representation, or they've had no candidates running, and then they'd fill them in, and then they wouldn't, and then they'd be a commissioner for a month and you'd never see them. But do you have like any information on like some Ward 8 SMDs that always had an issue with maintaining commissioners?
There have been a couple of those. I'm not remembering offhand which they are. So we could do a little historical research, but basically, I don't know that that's anything that the task force can deal with. For instance, when we've had single member districts that were largely a university dormitory situation, the nature of the people who live there were going to determine whether it was Catholic University or Georgetown or AU or Howard or wherever, that it was going to be difficult to keep somebody in place for a full 2 years. Interesting, a couple of the colleges, the universities, managed to keep successors in place, while a couple of them had great difficulty and would go for 2 or 3 terms without a student there at all. But those kinds of issues probably are going to be difficult. You're basically, in this exercise, just to get back to the overall approach to it, you've got a Rubik Cube kind of a situation. And you're going to keep turning census tracts the same way you would parts of the Rubik Cube until you can get a solution. So it's going to be driven by a large degree by those sorts of unmovable factors. And I'm speaking of unmovable factors and universities, that's one of the places where we had to deal with split blocks. You deal with split blocks because there are too many people who are living in a census block to fit within a single member district. The Census Bureau doesn't have any rules about how many people can be in a census block. So if there are 10,000 people living in a high rise, that's fine with them. Indeed, in New York, they actually have districts that are based on the 1st to the 20th floor and the 20th to the 40th floor, because they have to again, equalize the population of some sort of a district. So
thank you. And what's the best way to email you?
You can reach me at my name at outlook.com. Gottlieb.Simon@outlook.com.
Will do. And also, earlier, Mr. Chairman, I was talking about the numbers. I don't want to split up neighborhoods either. So that's where I am on that. But thank you. And I guess I can go back and look at the voter results and see which ANCs had no candidates. I'll go back and review that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Gottlieb, over your right shoulder, or i.e. in the upper left corner of your window, that blue area is the area that I was talking about, and the potential to have, is it a gentlemanly agreement between the two council members to potentially add that to a Ward 8 ANC that would include the rest of Ward 8's Navy Yard?
Well, I will tell you, by the way, full disclosure, I'm a member of the Ward 6 Redistricting Task Force, and that's been a topic that came up at our last meeting. Councilmember Allen has indicated that he is totally open to a cross-boundary situation. But he said that so far, no other council member has indicated to him that they would be open to it. So there's a so the easiest way to answer your question is that that might be, in the end, the best way to make a viable, full, complete ANC across the river. The council member for Ward 6 is indicated his openness to such a situation. And if Councilmember White is open to such a situation, then it just matters whether or not the task force and residents are open to such a situation.
All right.
I will tell you on just on the matter of cross boundary that we currently have one in Ward 3 and 4. ANC 3G is actually half in Ward 4 and half in Ward 3. And that came about because Chevy Chase felt that they were a unified community and shouldn't be broken up. But when the ward redistricting came about, the wards required, as they do now, to be equalized, and Chevy Chase could not stay entirely in one ward without other changes that people didn't want to make going into place. So for ward purposes, they split Chevy Chase in half. But when it came time to do the ANC redistricting, the community there said, we still want to be one ANC grouping. And therefore, the council went along with that because that was the strong feeling of the constituents. We also, up until the last redistricting, had a situation more like the Navy Yard in Ward 8. And that was where ANC 3C01 was actually in Ward 1. It was that part of Ward 1 which was west of the park, not a big area, but just enough to have population there. And the Ward 1 needed it so that it could have sufficient population for equalization purposes. Mm-hmm. The people in 3C01 were in Ward 1, but were part of a larger Ward 3 Advisory Neighborhood Commission.
Fair enough. I mean, so it can be done.
But they decided that because of parking rules and trash collection, that it made more sense for them to be the same as the people in the rest of 3C than the people in Ward 1 who are all the way over on the other side of the park.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine.
So this last time around, 3C01 was moved out of Ward 1 and moved into Ward 3. currently have a situation in Ward 6 and 6D in which the park, Potomac, there's a park in the Washington Channel, and that park is in Ward 2, but in Advisory Neighborhood Commission 6D, which is a 6D. Now, it turns out nobody that is credited with residing in the park, so it doesn't have any implications for ward redistricting. So therefore, they let it go that way. And so there are precedents and existing precedents for cross-ward ANCs. This is the bottom line.
Well, I've heard enough interest from committee members and just the general public that I'll speak on behalf of the council member, and that we'd like to explore that possibility of adding that corner of Ward 6 into whatever ANC we come up with for the portion of Ward 8 west of the river. Is that something that you could facilitate, or what's the official way to do that, to get it on record that we're exploring that possibility?
Well, I'm happy to carry that back, but if you would like to write a email to our task force chair, that's another way to do it. And of course, Councilmember White may want to share a word or two with Councilmember Allen.
All right, all right. I will get with the executive committee on that after the meeting. Thank you, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Wanda, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's been up for a second or two, so.
I'm sorry.
No worries at all. I wanted to get some clarity on this piece that you were referring to. I will speak to the council member in the morning about this opportunity and even schedule a meeting with him and Councilmember Allen. But I wanted to get a clearer picture of what we're talking about. How many residents are we talking about? What exactly corner are you referring to? If you can help, and I may have missed it.
Well, Wanda, I can send you a map showing exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
It would include what's behind me, but on 8.5 by 11, and also show the census tract population data. But
Okay.
it would make a fair amount of sense to include that with the rest of the.
How many additional residents are we talking about?
I counted about 11 or 1,200.
Yeah, it's a nice chunk. It would fill out the 3.5 and make it a 4.
And my last question is, and I guess I'll have to maybe talk to Councilmember Silverman's office or one of the members. Will we have to, I mean, because we voted on the boundaries as it is, will we have to then go back to the council and do a modification, or since we've already voted on the boundaries, the ward boundaries?
No, this doesn't entail any change in ward boundaries whatsoever.
Okay.
The ward boundaries stay where they are. And the only question is what the ANC boundaries are and the single member district boundaries. So as we've been talking, it is existing situation in Ward 3 and 4, where they have one ANC that is half in Ward 3 and half in Ward 4. And not only is the ANC that way, but one of the SMDs, in fact, the SMD of the chairperson, is half in one ward and half in the other ward.
Okay, that's where I'm confused. So bear with me, committee members, until I can get my boundaries here together. So if it's not changing the ward boundaries and it's only affecting the SMD, why are we having to contact either of the council members to make this change if it's already in Ward 8?
Oh, no. The part we're talking about is in Ward 6.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you're saying to bring that over to Ward 8?
Well,
as an SMD, which only applies to the commission governing body, not the ward governing body at the city council level.
You see, the issue is that the default is that all of the components of an ANC should be within one ward. That's the default.
Yes.
And so this would be an exception. And if the ward council members didn't jointly support the cross-boundary ANC, then we wouldn't expect that the council would support it.
So this particular SMD would be in 2 wards, 6 and 8? Okay,
Well,
no?
Well,
It would be in Ward 6, it would be in a commission attached to Ward 8.
Right.
The majority of the commission would be in one ward, and a little piece of the commission would be in the other ward.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Okay, I'm clear now. Thank you for that.
And
Sorry that it took me a little bit longer to understand.
and for the council members' purposes, they would still be Charles Allen's constituents, but for the purpose of a neighborhood and a advisory neighborhood commission, they would belong to 8.
I mean,
F,
whatever that is,
or
F, whatever it is. I got it. Okay, thank you. I will look forward to that map and share with the council member. If there's no issue with council member Allen, I'm sure council member White, I'm not speaking for him without talking to him, but I'm sure that he would be supportive of it as well. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Does anyone else have anything for Gottlieb? He's given us a good amount of his time, and any thoughts? I don't see any hands going up.
I have one thought about the S3 tool. Have
Okay.
many of Mr. Chairman, you have used it. Have other members, maybe Troy as well, have other members of the task force used the tool yet?
Yes.
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 Okay, so I don't know that it would, you all could chime in with it. I don't know that it's necessary for every single member of the task force to use it. I mean, it is an enormously helpful thing and automates a whole bunch of things that we used to have to do with paper and pencil and what have you. But you do have, I think, sort of broken things down into teams for outreach purposes. Are you going to be looking at the boundaries as a group as a whole, or are you going to be looking at boundaries by smaller groups? Or that's yet to be decided?
It's yet to be confirmed. The idea I had is to look at the boundaries as a whole. So
Okay.
Our agenda, our master agenda is a living document, and we're expecting to have Councilwoman Silverman at our next meeting, but by meeting 4, I'd like to have a good amount of our time dedicated to having some of those redistricting tool ideas up on screen so that we can move towards a solid 3 and then 1 at our last meeting.
What I was thinking about is that it's an excellent tool, but there is a little bit of a learning curve involved, and not everybody is equally digitally oriented. And I would just imagine that if you could have partnerships or teams set up with somebody who can take a lead in just operating the tool and putting in the ideas that somebody else had about which way to do things might be something to look at, and so that you got the maximum amount of information without overtaxing every member of the team to manage to operate the thing.
Understood, agreed. I mean, maybe we could have some of our outreach members for each ANC be responsible for forming a new ANC around those boundaries, and then maybe do I guess maybe meeting 4 or 5, probably meeting 4 with that in mind. It's an approach. Thank you for that idea.
All right, well, I'll recede back into the map. I'll hang around for the rest of the meeting in case anything else comes up, but good to have.
Commissioner Clark did just ask that you talk about the portion of Ward 6 that became Ward 8. When you say talk about, anything particularly looking for, Commissioner Clark? Any thoughts on that, Gottlieb? The part of Ward 6 that became Ward 8?
Well, it's obviously unlike the existing Ward 8. And so it's going to be an interesting way to connect it with the rest of the wall.
Okay. I don't think we have ages in any of the census data, population age, but I would guess that that part of Ward 8 now west of the river skews younger than the average population for the ward.
Sure, and economically it's different as well. Racially it's different as well. All of those things come into play.
Okay. Well, we did come into the meeting with an agenda, but I think we've covered a lot of it, and particularly public commentary, because we had a lot of Q&A with you and Ms. Phillips. Let me just refresh myself on where we are in the agenda. Does anybody want to share any commentary or experiences with the tool, with the Esri tool, with the process thus far? Is everybody know where to find a tool? Does anyone have any difficulty, or is there any sentiment about how we're doing relative to our timeline to task in this effort? Ms. Bunn, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I would just say that if you're unfamiliar with using the tool, to watch the training that Office of Planning did. It was very helpful because you got to walk through different scenarios, like creating a new SMD. So I would just encourage those of my fellow task members that if you really want to get into it, to watch that training. And the other thing I will say is that going back to your question about the hard copy map, I think at some point we will have to get together, because though it has not come out formally yet, because there may be some splitting of census blocks, even though nobody wants to do that. If that is the case, the subcommittee on redistricting is going to ask us for a hard copy map in addition to the Esri map. So we might want to think about at some point getting together to kind of go through that, for the purposes of submitting our report to the subcommittee. So just wanted to flag those two things.
Fair enough. I'm gonna write that down. I'm thinking that will happen somewhere around meeting 5, between meeting 5 and meeting 6. I think that's the 16th of March, off the top of my head. But fair enough. Yeah. If we need to, census tract splitting. Got it. Mr. Presswood, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, good meeting, Chairman. I just wanted to just echo some of the high level points that I heard. One, just to, I think, follow up on what Gottlieb mentioned in terms of working with the Esri tool. I think it makes sense. I know last time we had our meeting, there were several members of the committee that, how do you say, they said they were old school. And so that meant that they were not really didn't really want to work with the online tool, that they were used to working with the maps and the, you know, the numbers and the data. And so because the online tool is a lot easier, I think it makes sense to even work with some of our, you know, task force members to develop those maps. And then also I do like the idea of working on the map for the ANC that you assigned us to last time, either for the ANC or the SMD that you assigned us last time. And so I just wanted to put a plug in for that in terms of support for it. The other thing too, I just wanted to say that I heard from the OP that if we want to make sure we're submitting a really good map with as few errors as possible, that we want to submit that at some point in March. And so I think, if I recall correctly, Mr. Chairman, our timeline sort of takes us through March, but maybe it makes sense to rejigger that timeline to give us some time to get before the OP.
Or you went out.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, point taken, Troy, thank you. There was slack in the planned meetings, particularly meetings 3, 4, and 5. After we have I've had obviously Gottlieb and Ms. Phillips come, I just wanted to have the Councilwoman Silverman come and speak, but we should be well on our way to having formed the ideas for at least the ANCs by meeting 4. So maybe meeting 5 is that time where we say, hey, these are 3 maps, have created narratives around them, and maybe between meetings 4 and 5, push that to OP for any feedback as we prepare to vote on a final map at Ward 6 with any commentary, and sort of white glove it for the subcommittee, for the council subcommittee.
Yeah, I see this now. This is very helpful. But then also keep in mind the idea around meeting in person. And so I don't know when that would take place, or if that's going to be a one-off or an ad hoc or what have you. But I know that's been something that folks have asked about. So, but no, this meeting calendar actually, I think makes a little bit more sense now that I've seen it.
Okay. Well, another thing we'll do is make sure that we get this back out. I wanted all the committee members to have it, to understand where we were going, having charted the direction. So yeah, obviously, like I said, this is evolving, and you know, just like with tonight, there was an agenda that we kind of addressed in a natural way, at least the ideas section that I had. A lot of these ideas we've already discussed here. So yeah, let's digest, and I will circle back with the committee members. It's Wednesday night, so by the end of the week, or we'll say by lunchtime on Monday, with the idea of how we're going to shape at least the next 2 meetings to get us to OP, as well as see how we would go about providing physical in-person input on our mapping efforts. Does that work? Does that sound like a plan for what you're suggesting?
It certainly does to me, Mr. Chairman. And I would just say, you know, don't be shy to give us assignments, like, you know, homework assignments, like, guys, I need this done by XYZ date. Like, if you really want our input on some of these ideas that maybe we didn't quite flesh out totally, I'm completely, and I think hopefully our task members are too, open to providing those comments to you so that you and the executive staff there could make the best decision going forward. But yes, I think once you figure out when that other meeting, that in-person meeting should be and where to squeeze that in, for those who want to physically get together and look at the map and offer suggestions that way, I think that makes a lot of sense.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
How about this? I'm going to take you up on that homework assignment. Can we scroll up to the committee leads for each of the ANCs? Should have been listed on the first page.
1 second, I just lost it. Give me a moment just to bring that back up. My apologies.
No worries. The reason I want to do this is because I'm gonna ask that each of the committee leads get with their co-lead and indeed try to come up with a map to present for the ANC that you're representing. Because between now and meeting 3, we will have all had at least one engagement with each of the assigned ANCs. So the goal would be to get any feedback from those meetings and come up with a map for the ANC that you've been selected to represent as an engagement lead so that we can discuss them on screen. There'll be 7 maps on screen and we can start to get an understanding of what's palatable for shaping the new 8A, 8B, C, D, E, and F. And I pause there because, you know, this goes back to the permutations and the sentiment I get that even though Gottlieb has, you know, been clear that we don't have to stick to an even number, odd number of SMDs, if we do stick to it, to end up at around 44 SMDs, there's a certain, you know, number alignment. I suggested 9, 9, 5, 5, and 7 to give us 6 commissions. There's also the potential for 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 7, and 7, which would give us 8 commissions in Ward 8. And I'm sure there's a couple of other options there. But if each of the 2 engagement leads could come up with a map and forward to those to me by CLB, what's next Friday? The 11th? 11, 12, 13, 14. Valentine's Day is Monday the 14th. So yeah, if you could forward a map just via email to my email address, 8a03@anc.dc.gov. And I'm gonna get to that in a second question Mr. Meadows posed a moment ago. We have not, well, so that's the ask. Is there anyone who feels like we can't address that or get that done by next Friday, the 11th, CLB? Just a map of what a good ANC would look like for the ANC you're representing as an engagement lead. Any thoughts from the committee?
No.
All right. All right. So I'm going to take that silence and that all right as consent. And let's go ahead and put that out there as a follow-up to this meeting.
Can we scroll up a little bit? I'm sorry, I'm trying to see. B, okay.
D. And you'll see some of the green text in this. We'll get this out in soft copy after this meeting because there are links to obviously the green underlined text where I could find relevant information elsewhere on the internet. SMD. Okay.
Why do I keep doing that?
Can I ask you a question, Chairman?
Sure. Who's speaking?
I noticed I need some clarification for 8B. I thought my names, but I see Barbara Clark is supposed to be representing 8B, but I thought I had signed up for that.
There's two names. There's two names for each.
Okay, I'm Barbara Jones.
Oh, okay. Well,
I see Barbara Clark, but I had signed up to work with Miss Mason for 8B.
okay, that is a correction that I'm glad you spoke up on. That is, we can make that correction. No problem. That was just a transcription error when we were going through and selecting positions. So that withstanding, we just have two items left to cover before we can convene for the evening. One is there definitely needs to be, just so that points like that aren't missed, I think we need a committee secretary. And for the purposes of keeping track of all of our discussion and notes and making sure we are we're writing down the right Barbara. So I'm requesting that someone raise their hand to serve as our redistricting committee secretary for the purposes of recordation, accuracy, and putting out the notes that will form an out brief for each of our next 5 meetings. We'll say 4 or 5, depending on how we come out of this evening. I believe we have 18 panelists aside from Gottlieb. That's 17 panelists should all be committee members, and only 4 of us are already assigned to roles. So can I get a volunteer to serve as our Ward 8 Redistricting Committee Secretary? Okay, so then I'm gonna see who. Barbara Jones and Carmen McCall are on video. Shows a little bit of interest and engagement. Would either of you like to serve as our secretary?
You really don't need a secretary because we on Zoom. Zoom can, once you complete the call, it can type out the minutes and everything. It's just an extra little fee that you can do with it.
So we have been on this for 1 hour and 51 minutes. How far into the transcript is what happened at 6:55 p.m.? Or if I were to go back and to ask a question about Ms. Phillips' discussion on ANC data files, where would we find that?
Let's see.
That's the role of the secretary, is to sort of keep track of all of the information coming out of this meeting and make sure that I don't think it's a heavy lift.
Carmen be real good, Carmen McCall. Carmen. I see she scratched.
Any volunteers to serve as our committee secretary?
I think you're right, Mr. Chairman. It's important to have a secretary while we are recording these records, and they will be here for its history. It should be someone that's recording so we can have something readily available if in fact we need minutes. So even with that, we still need to transcribe minutes and present to the body. So, and because we have 2 men as the chair and the vice chair, I'm really encouraging some female to do this so that we have some gender parity. So with that said, I will put my mute button back on.
Thank you, Ms. Lockridge. All right.
Nominating somebody.
All right.
Okay, I have,
I'll do it.
okay, Carmen, I just called Carmen on the phone. She said she would do it.
Need to hear from Ms. Carmen.
Carmen, you can say something.
Ms. McCall, you're muted right now. There you go.
I'm unmuted,
Okay.
Chair. Okay.
You be willing to serve
I'll do it.
and you be willing to prepare draft notes of our meeting and discussion points and make sure I don't write down the wrong Barbara when it comes to who's performing a certain task?
Yes, I will. I will.
Okay.
But I also need to know the names of all of the members, and I need to know things that have happened prior to now. So if somebody can just give me some brief information, I can probably formulate it in the manner that it needs to be formulated.
We can get together on that.
Okay.
All right, I nominate Ms. Carmen McCall to be the Ward 8 Redistricting Committee Secretary. Can I get a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
All right.
I second.
All right. How about this? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? 0. Any abstentions? 0. Well, there are 17 committee members here, and that makes it unanimous. Ms. Carmen McCall is the Ward 8 Redistricting Committee Secretary. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. McCall, did you record that vote?
I was going to say the same thing.
I have it now.
All right. 17-0-0. All right. The last thing I wanted to cover is the idea that we said we would do an email address, a Gmail address, but I don't get that there was too much enthusiasm. So I'm going to ask again, is there any reason why we should not have a catch-all email address that I would like to have the secretary take the lead on in responding, or at least receiving those emails and taking notes of the issues or comments raised? Is there anyone that feels strongly that we should not do this? All right. So then I'm going to ask I'm going to delegate the duty of setting up a Gmail account that is appropriate. And I'll leave open the creativity of naming it for the Ward 8 Redistricting Committee, a Gmail account for the public and other committee members to send as a catch-all, or use it as a catch-all for this effort, to our vice chair, Mr. Marcus Coates. Mr. Coates, any thoughts on that, and anything you need to know, you think, to go about setting that up?
No, just probably who would need access to that, so I can grant access to individuals that would need it. But it will be no issue with getting that set up.
I think we're going to keep access to the 5 of us now who are executives on this committee. But now that we've agreed to that, I'd like to have it up and running and, say by Friday.
Got it.
So that we can push that not only to the rest of the committee members and we can communicate about the nuances of this via a group thread with the executive members, but also to push that out to the press that is sort of covering our efforts to redistrict Ward 8. So thank you, Mr. Coates, for that. And if you think Friday is a reasonable deadline?
Absolutely, I'll have it by Friday.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's all I think we intended to cover this evening. Are there any additional comments from the committee, from the general public?
I do.
questions, we'll get that email address out to everyone and start publicizing it somewhere on or around CLB Friday. And otherwise, any thoughts? Oh, I see two hands up, Ms. Bunn and Ms. Lockridge. Ms. Bunn, please.
Yes, I just for some clarity, Chair, the email address, that's for the public to correspond with us. That's separate and apart from our communication as a task force, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so, and then separate, and then second to that, are we, the task force, are we just communicating through regular email, or are we creating a Google group so that we can communicate? I'm just for clarity, so I know what to expect.
Given that this is a fairly short sprint and I already have access to 6 email addresses, I wouldn't say that there's a need to create another email address for this effort. I'm
Right,
open to the idea.
No. I was just asking for clarity. I'm not advocating for. I just wanted to be clear on where I should be looking. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ms. Lockridge?
Thank you. I want to piggyback on what Sheila said. When I was thinking, when we were talking initially about creating this Google or this Gmail account, was that all correspondent would go through that, including correspondent that we have with each other. So we're not looking for an email from me for the meeting links, or everything is coming through that Gmail account. So that was what my thought is, every single thing. So everything is housed in one location. So we're not looking at 2. The second thing is I'm happy to, once we get that email, is to put it on council member social media, as well as our Facebook page and our newsletter. The council member has several thousands of followers, so we can make sure, and I encourage all of us as well to promote it on our social media accounts.
Thank you. My idea was that we would continue to use the email addresses that we signed up for as committee members with, because trying to have 5 people even answer one email address or be responsible for a dialogue between 2 people, it's I think it's easy to get lost in communication for each of us individually. Like if I want to reach Wanda, but then there's like 5 other emails about shaping a particular S&D, given how the rest of our day-to-day business lives run, I think that can be confusing.
Understood. I completely understand. You don't even have to say anything else. I got it. Completely understand.
Yes, ma'am. Sheila, did you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. All right. Well, if that is all the commentary, I would like to thank Gottlieb for his time and attendance and engagement and the willingness to broker a 2 council member exchange of SMDs. And of course, I believe Ms. Phillips is gone for the evening, but thank you all for your time and for a successful meeting 2. Our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, February 16th, 6 to 8 p.m. And of course, there'll be a lot of conversation and engagement before then. Most of all, look out for that task force email to be coming out in the next few days. And again, my email address is 8803@anc.dc.gov. Thank you all. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous aye. Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned, and I will see you all on the 16th, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.